stuff could happen to you in your career. You could see it. If there's time, I'll share one story at the end. But so moving on. Thank you for sharing that with us. I got to tell you. So it's yes, sir.
I was just wondering, fire departments have to work with like a lot of different life-saving organizations, like police and other fire departments. In this kind of situation, firefighters are kind of underqualified for the job.
Yeah.
Once they call up somebody else and they show up and take over the incident, can they just pack up and leave?
No,
or?
that's typically not how we do things. That's a good question. At that point, we're there to assist, right? It's a good question. And the incident commander, ultimately, that person is still in charge of the scene, but they can defer or pass the responsibility of the operations part of that rescue off to somebody who's specialized, like the dive team, like a person that you're referencing. But we don't get to leave. It's not really that simple, because there's still other functions that need to happen. You have a question?
Yes. So, like, once you make that call for more trained personnel,
Resources, yeah.
Do you just stand around and make sure the scene stays secure?
That is one function that still needs to happen, yeah.
So that group, dive team, hazmat team, tech rescue team, they're there to do a function within a large-scale incident. So we still run the incident. We might have police doing traffic, we might have the dive team going down to save somebody, but the overall incident is ours until termination.
Yeah, that's a good question. So again, like, there's always activities that are happening simultaneously or at the same time. There are times in your career, where you might be on a location and things pause. Maybe it's on a structure fire and we've reached the point where we believe the fire is knocked down, but there's a large volume of smoke. So your incident commander on a place like that might tell you, okay, stop flowing water. Let's kind of let things settle down and see if we can, have the smoke lift, and if there's any more hot spots, or if we truly have put out the fire. But that same mindset is applicable to a place like this or a trench rescue. The incident really doesn't end until the victim is out or the body is recovered. That incident that scene is stabilized to the point where the fire department can leave and no additional bystander comes in. Because like in this example, where there's a construction worker that's in a trench and we rescue them, we can't just leave at that point knowing that this trench is open to the public, so some little school kids can't come after school and fall down and the same thing happen to them, right? Something has to happen here at the end. Incidents, they typically, they can take hours, they can take days, they can take weeks, depending on how big this event is. And there might be, you might work a 24-hour shift and go home and have your day off and come back, and it still be ongoing, and you come in all happy to work, and they're like, hey, get on the engine and go back out to the call, and you're like, are you serious? Is it still going on? Yeah, it's still going on. I love calls that that get toned out and get taken care of, and I'm back in like 35 minutes or less, because I like my coffee. But it's not always that case, and we're paid to do this job. So these are good questions. Yep.
In the event of a confined space rescue, what is the procedure for getting air to someone if they need it?
It depends on the scene. That's a good question. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Okay, so before we get there, we're going to hold that question because it's important. The one thing that I want to impress about you on this slide right here: know where stuff is on the truck and know how it works. Even you guys now at this level, you can still contribute to your department by knowing where stuff is on the truck. Hey, I'll go get that for you. We call it a gopher. It's go for this, go for that, not the animal. But time is critical, So if we ask you to go get the 4-gas monitor, if we ask you to go get the confined space fan or tubing, you gotta be on it. You gotta know where that stuff is. So as you go into the station, as you hang out, once your normal job functions are done, it's very tempting to sit in the kitchen and watch TV, but really is everyone, myself included, should be out in the bay, out in the trucks, studying our job, okay? Okay, so let's talk about a few types of rescue. So again, we're going to 8:45. There's people that have to leave at 8:45. Okay, all right. So we'll go to 8:40 and I'll share my story because I think it applies to this. So we said at the beginning there's lots of different types of rescue. When your book talks about rope rescue, it really is referring to high angle rescue at elevation, maybe up way above the ground, or then wildland rescue, and you can think like on the side of a hill, maybe a hiker slipped off a trail on their bike and fell down into a ravine, and you're rappelling down the side of the mountain. That's kind of where your book has this. And you're going to be on confined space rescues where you're going to, in like our picture before, you have that tripod and there's a manhole cover and you use rope and rigging and lower a person down in. Your book doesn't really lump that into the rope rescue, but this is really talking about high angle rope rescue, a lot of technical carabiners and rope lays and things like that. But again, the goal is the same, to have the people that are technically certified to do that rescue be the ones up in the hot zone to do it safely, and then have people like you and me be in support. I might not be high angle rope rescue certified, but I at least can set up a Pressix, or I know where the bag is on the truck that has the carabiners, or an extra bag that has the longest length of rope that we have, and I can go get that, or I can secure the scene, or I could get the medical equipment staged so when they do finally make contact with the victim, that we can quickly bring medical services to them, right? All right, so when it comes to confined space rescue, these can happen in a variety of different locations, and this is the reason why, like the question earlier was, how do you get air to this person? And it's a hard question just to give you a nice, simple one-line answer, because when it comes to confined spaces, it literally is what the name implies. It's an area in the world that is not meant for continuous human habitation. It could be in a factory, and it could be like a little tunnel behind a row of equipment for a maintenance guy. So once in a while, come in for 5 minutes and squirt a little oil and then leave. There's not a place for him to sit down and have his lunch. There's not a place for them to have a nap. This could happen on a farm. So think about your jurisdiction or the town or city that you live in. So Salt Lion really doesn't have grain silos. Who's from Fowlerville? So Fowlerville. And there could be other places, but Fowlerville to me, when I think of Fowlerville, I think of industrial grain silos, big ones, right? You've probably, if you've driven down 96 going towards Lansing, they're right there by the freeway. That's what we're talking about. That in itself, again, those silos are meant to store product, and the nature of the product, often when it's dumped in there, all this dust from that product poofs up and it displaces oxygen. So when that happens, if there's a worker in there, there's not going to be enough oxygen in there to breathe. Or if the worker, for some reason, I don't know why, but if the worker steps off the gangway trying to do maintenance and puts their foot on the grain and then gets sucked down into the grain, then that's a confined space rescue. In South Lyon, we have utility pits. They're underground. They might be for water treatment. Some of them are anywhere from 8 to 30 feet underground. And they look like a big concrete vault with a tube and stairs built into the side for workers to go up and down and do maintenance. But again, nobody's staying there for very long. Cisterns or wells, that's for collecting water, typically. Storage tanks, cofferdams, again, it's to control liquids. These places, these confined spaces could be anywhere. They could be out in the roadway, a manhole cover. If you open that up and you look down there, there could be a ladder on the side and you could see it open up at the bottom. That could be a confined space. And there's a lot of things that have to happen before somebody is allowed to go down there and perform their work. Because again, that diver that day, that was their job. They worked for a separate company. They came to that job and they got certified. The company supplied them with all the equipment, and yet something went wrong. So a lot of times in confined spaces, as it relates to the fire department, companies might have to come to the fire department and ask for permission or tell the fire department, hey, we're doing work here underground. I don't know what the rules were that day in 1997, but my guess is that that company, that underwater construction dive team company, should have at least made a courtesy call to Livonia Fire and said, hey, we're doing work here today. We're putting a diver underwater. I don't know because I wasn't there. My guess is that the current, the water pressure of how fast that water was flowing through that point contributed to that person's demise. And he had the safety equipment, right? But it only survived so long. We don't know what happened. Maybe his line got pinched. But it's our job to go make a rescue. So as it relates to getting oxygen to the person, the very first thing that should happen is before any person goes down to a pit or in one of these spaces, really an air sample should be taken. Is there enough oxygen to support life? Human beings require a certain percent of oxygen, right? Our atmosphere isn't 100% oxygen. It's made up of nitrogen and other gases, and oxygen only makes up about 20%, right? It's weird. The human body actually comes into trouble not only if there's not enough oxygen and you suffocate, but you can get into situations where there's too much oxygen, and then your brain starts doing loopy things. So that's one of the reasons why, like, there's medical oxygen, which is pure oxygen for medical purposes. But then your air tank that you wear, your SCBA, if you don't know this, you'll learn. That tank is not pure oxygen. Hopefully everybody knows that. It's your, what's the word I'm looking for? Your SCBA compressor. It takes a sip of air, of atmospheric air, and what it does is it compresses it in different stages, and it extracts liquid, water from that. So it gets the molecules closer and closer together, and then it jams it into your tank, and that's why you can have 45 minutes of breathable air. But I digress. But so before the work is done, hopefully the worker knows that it's safe to go in there. Sometimes, to go to the question, sometimes the worker has to enter that space already on oxygen, not necessarily on air, not necessarily supplied by the fire department, supplied by their employer. But you, as it relates to the fire department, you are not going to breathe on their air. You're going to bring your own. You have your SCBA tanks on your truck. Some departments have smaller tanks. They're called escape cylinders. They're like little 5-minute bottles with a mask. Because some of these spaces are so tight that you or myself don't fit in there well with our full turnout gear, in our helmet, in our air tank, if the tube is not a big enough diameter and I'm not fitting in there, I got a problem. Either I got to find a skinnier firefighter, or I got to start taking stuff off. And the last thing I want to take off is my oxygen. There are masks, and you'll see a picture where you can have an airline that is maybe on a 150 to 300 foot long tube that's hooked up to a person like yourself who's called a tender, and they manipulate the oxygen to the SCBA cylinders, and you go down there with just a mask and your harness and ropes with the airline, and that way you don't have to wear that big SCBA cylinder on your back. So as it relates to the victim, we have our choice. First, we have to figure out how firefighters can access that person, but then we got to bring them O2. It could be as simple as taking an oxygen cylinder from the med bag with a non-rebreather. Could be that simple. Probably not. They might have to have an additional SCBA mask with a uninterrupted flow of air from that same system that you are on. So it just kind of depends. But that is a consideration. First of all, we got to make sure that it's safe for us. We have our gear. We got to figure out what happened that person became unconscious, and then we got to quickly come up with a plan to access them. So let's finish this confined space, and then I'll share my story because we're running out of time. Even if you're confined space certified, that certificate only carries you so far. There are limitations maybe on how deep you can go. So some organizations only let you go down 8 feet. And beyond that, or if the victim is out of your direct line of sight, if you look down the manhole and you can't see them and they're down a little ways, which is very possible, you might have to call for additional resources at the county or state level to come in and assist you on doing that specific job function of the actual rescue. It's not about pride at this point. Oh my God, South Lyon Fire can't rescue their own people. No. South Lyon Fire is obligated to rescue the person in the safest manner possible. Okay, so let's see here. We talked about this. Like, these are all things that we have to think about. Is there enough air for us to breathe? Do we have to pump air in? Do we have to suck bad chemicals out with the fan? I'm a big guy. Am I physically even going to be able to fit down the same tube that person did? Or do we got to look and see who's the shortest, skinniest person on the department? Hey, guess what? Guess where you're going? And then we got to figure out what happened to that person. Maybe they didn't get overcome by fumes. Maybe they just went down there and had a heart attack. Maybe they're a diabetic and didn't take their medication. Or maybe they're when they got down there, they're standing in a pool of water and touched the electrical outlet or a broken line and electrocuted themselves. We got to make sure that we don't do the same stupid thing ourselves. We just got to make sure that we can go down there quickly and effectively and rescue them. So going back to that event of the diver, when work is done, that company should have a plan of what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. And then they should communicate that to the fire department itself. So that way we know what they're getting into. If you go on scene to rescue somebody and there's people from that same company that are outside, use them as a resource. They can give you a lot of information that will save you time, and maybe your incident commander is tied up in the heat of the moment, giving orders, and you're there standing on the perimeter, and somebody comes up to you, even if you're new, and they say, hey, I work for this company, I'm so-and-so. You can get on the radio and call your supervisor, whoever that is in the food chain, and say, you know, firefighter no-show, I I have somebody from the company, I really think they have information that could help us. So, all right, so I'm going to share a story and then we're going to wrap it up here because there's a lot of other things that you're going to talk about.